everybody. I'm sorry we got the notice out kind of on short notice, but we had some things kind of fall through with our planned speakers and panelists. So, but nonetheless, we still want to go ahead and do a meeting for something that a lot of us had been, we'd been meaning to put on a training for one-to-one organizing conversations actually for quite a long time now, and it just kind of kept on slipping by the wayside from us. So we felt like this might be a good opportunity, especially, candidates and campaigns can use one-to-one organizing conversations in that. So I encourage candidates to, pay attention, try to adopt this method, but also you could just use it for general organizing. I did one-to-ones a lot when I was organizing on the Eastern Shore on non-electoral stuff too, and it's very helpful, effective recruiting tool. So we will get more into that later on in the meeting, but thank you again for everybody coming to our April meeting here. And yeah, in case people don't already follow us on social media, or if they want to sign up for our email list, check out our website, become a dues paying member, et cetera, et cetera. We do have a link tree that has, it's one website that has links to all of our different pages and ways to get past, et cetera. So please check out that link tree. It's https ://linktr.ee/HOCO progressives. Check us out, follow us. Aside from that, if you are interested in, becoming more involved with Progressive Democrats of Howard County, we do have meetings normally about once a month. It's supposed to be the last Monday of the month, which is what today is, but for next month, it's going to be our endorsement meeting. So we decided to do it on Monday, May 16th instead at 7 p.m. So please, if you do want to be able to vote, to attend the meetings, you don't have to be a dues paying member, but to be able to vote in the club on things like endorsements, you do have to be a dues paying member, as well as have been, voted in by the existing membership. So those who do want to vote on the 16th in these endorsements, make sure to get your dues in. The next thing we'll talk about on the next slide is how to pay those dues. But, again, hocoprogressives.com, you can find the information there, sign up for our email list. Our due structure is just for you, it's annual dues. So for you, just a solo membership's $36 a year. For you and one other person, a +1 membership, that's $50 to cover you and another person. Something about our membership is you actually do not have to be a registered Democrat to be a member. And then, if you're having some financial troubles and, having trouble, getting the dues together, but you still want to be a member, we do offer a 3 to 6 month dues waiver based off need. If people are interested, wondering how they can get involved, it is election season coming up. We are going to be doing endorsements, as I said. So we need, could always use more people who are willing to help plan events, whether that be, tabling for the No Developer Donation Pledge, tabling for our candidates that we end up endorsing, or just, hosting door knock sessions for the candidates that we endorse. Please let us know if you want to get involved in any way. So yeah, as I said, dues, if you do want to pay them, become a dues paying member. Venmo is one option if you want to pay them digitally. Our Venmo link is there. All of this, again, also on hocoprogressives.com website. And if you want to pay with a check, you can mail the check to 6801 Oak Hall Lane, P.O. Box 6523 in Columbia. And as I said earlier, in addition to paying dues, you also have to be voted in by a majority of existing members at attendance at a meeting at least. As we said last meeting, if you were a charter member and you do know who you were, if you didn't repay your dues, they expired on March 1st of this year. So wanted to put that out there. Okay, so little treasurer's report. Last meeting we had $1,366.82. I checked with Huri, our treasurer, beforehand. He said we now have $1,452.82 plus another $266.24 in our Venmo, which I'm guessing we probably did have before, but we weren't including in the 1366 tally before. But aside just from our standard treasurer's report that we do every meeting, we do have in our bylaws we're supposed to do an annual audit of the club finances. So I believe Huri, Megan, and Kiana had done that. So I don't know if Huri, if you want to just give a quick kind of status update on that audit.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. The audit. So the audit for our club is fairly simple. It's not. It's it's looking at since we were chartered last year, we didn't have many. We didn't have a lot of revenue. We didn't have a lot of expenses. We didn't have any expenses. So it would be just a matter of reconciling the different, so our bank account and our Venmo account to ensure that whatever that we're seeing in the whatever we had in a Venmo and whatever was ultimately reflected in the bank account all added up, and then filing taxes. A club like ours with there's a threshold where if you're under a certain amount of money, you only need to send in. It's like it's called a postcard saying that you haven't brought in more than X amount of money, and so we filed that as well, and then like I said, no expenses, and this audit was done for the previous for 2021, and so we'll need to do another one again, of course, next year for 2022, and so like I said, fairly simple, and it was pretty straightforward.
Yes, we'll
and I can take any questions.
Hey, Huri, it's Karen. I don't have any questions about the audit, but I'm assuming that right now, any money we're taking in, it's 100% from dues.
Yeah. So initially, our first deposit to the account was from T-shirts, but that's about it. So everything else that we have taken in from since July of last year is just dues.
And then I think Harry Dunbar might have given us like an initial donation.
Yes. Harry and Carla gave donations. Harry gave $200 and Carla gave $72.
Yeah. But we might start spending some of this money soon enough between campaign season and also some upcoming events that we might try to have a club attendance at, where we might spend a little bit of money to get a spot. But yeah, thank you, Huri, Kiana, and Megan for doing the audit. And I think, all things considered for a grassroots progressive group, over $1,700 in little less than a year is not bad, I don't think. So well done to everybody for helping, joining the club, paying dues, helping us raise funds, which hopefully makes a difference in the next election. So to swear in any new members who have since paid dues, or, for anybody, who hasn't paid dues, but, wants to pay dues and wants to become a member, now is also a good opportunity to, throw your name on there so that we can vote you in, or at least have the vote on whether or not to vote you in. So the new people who paid dues since last meeting were Drew Roth and Nick Smith. Was there anybody else that I'm forgetting or who wants to be voted on tonight? No. Okay. All right.
I have to pay dues. I owe the dues. Okay. So can you write it down? I'll pay it. I'm going to pay it. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And I can't remember. I'll try to pull up one of the older PowerPoints right now, but I can't remember if we voted you in at a meeting already or if we should do that now. Let me check our March meeting PowerPoint, or yeah, it doesn't look like we did at the last one.
If Huey has that list I created, Jake, I don't know if I can grab it real quick. Let me see if I can find it.
Yeah.
If there's the list that I sent to Huey is out on that includes everybody that's been voted in, is out in the Google. So hang on one second.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't believe.
I don't remember typing these.
Yeah, I don't remember. Yeah.
All right.
But the other thing is, if I'm not mistaken, Nick is. I could be wrong, but I thought Nick was a charter member.
He was, but then the way I interpreted it is he didn't pay his dues in time, so he expired, and so we had to revote him in. Was my interpretation. But yeah.
Okay.
Because I think he just paid in the last couple weeks. But,
okay.
Yeah.
We may not it may not be, we may not need to talk about this here now, but I mean, if you have already been voted in once, it might. I'm wondering what the, if that sort of would serve as just you could use that over and over again.
I'd have to.
Nick was just catching up.
Yeah, I'd have to check the bylaws, but I think just to be safe, we should, try to vote him in. I'm not too worried about him, getting booted anyways. But all right, well, I guess we could do these one at a time, all in, and also, we like to give people an opportunity if they want to say something before we vote. But Drew, I noticed you're on the call. You want to say anything to the group before we vote?
Hi, excited about becoming a member. I guess that's it.
Yes, thank you, Drew. Okay, well, I'm sorry. I motion that we vote on Drew's or vote to have Drew become a member. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, or I'll get chance for discussion.
I guess I'm not sure if I recall like sure to vote Drew in, but I guess I wanted to if it's all right to have an introduction of who Drew is.
Yeah, if you want to go a little more in depth than your couple words there, Drew, tell a little bit about your background.
Hi, I joined the HOCO for Us slate. You're being recruited and talked into it by Jake and Harry. Going back, I live in Elkridge. I'm a retired federal employee. In terms of, I've done a lot of community service over the years. I'm a former president of the Greater Elkridge Community Association. I was on the Howard County Historic Preservation District for 7 years. I am currently a member of the BWI Roundtable that's working to address airport noise issues from BWI caused by the FAA's Next Gen program. And I've been a member of the Rockburn Land Trust that manages conservation easements in the Patapsco Valley for the last 10 years or so. Any questions? Is that anything else you'd like to know?
Sounds really cool.
What's your position on immigration and immigrant and illegal?
Oh
Because I'm Latino, I am a leader from a community, and I have a lot of illegals under my wing. So I need to know what's your position.
I think illegal immigrants should be treated fairly and with humanity the same as anyone else. And I wrote up a note on kind of why I'm running for the Democratic Central Committee, and my core position on that is government should work for everybody, and everybody certainly encompasses undocumented workers or undocumented immigrants, and as well as documented immigrants and immigrants who become citizens. And that's part of government works for everybody.
Okay, and any other questions for Drew before we take a vote?
I have a question.
Yes.
Just now you said that people are illegal. People aren't illegal. People are people. If you're referring to people's immigration status, can we agree that we will say document versus undocumented? Thank you.
Yes, and I believe I did use the wording of documented, undocumented.
At the beginning, you did use the word illegal, just letting you know.
Okay, thank you for the advice. I
think, if I may, he was responding to Lizette's comment, and that's the word she used. And
I wanted to know if you want to use that word too.
I'm so sorry.
I wanted to know if he wants to use that word. That's why I use it.
I see.
Yes. Well, are there any other questions before the vote? Are we good?
Yeah, Jay, I wanted to add a couple of things here. I in the time that I've been involved in county issues, I've interacted with Drew on several occasions, and I think he will be a very good addition to this group. He brings in a wealth of knowledge on zoning and land use issues, which, as many know, is a source of severe inequity in Howard County. Historically, it's been a source of segregation. It still is being used as a source of segregation. And my interaction with him, I think, actually has shown me that I think he has that understanding of those nuances that many of us grapple with. So I'm definitely happy that he's decided to be part of PDHC. So thanks, Drew.
And Drew, it sounds like there are questions about the immigration stuff, and just so you know, some like background about kind of how Progressive Democrats of Howard County formed, since you are new to the group, is like we kind of spawned out of the Columbia Democratic Club.
I'm on camera now.
Out of a disagreement with them over we really wanted the county executive to end the ICE contract, and him and other council members refused to do so. So I'm curious, is ending the county ICE contract, did you have a position on that at the time, or are you in agreement with the club's position of we wanted to end the ICE contract?
Oh, I love what you did with that. It's awesome. Yeah, no, that's terrific. I thought that was an inspired thing to do.
Okay, well, I'm happy to hear that. And yeah, it was scary during the time, but in hindsight, it was interesting battle. But okay, well, are there any other comments or questions or concerns for Drew before we take that vote? And we can, if people want to take the vote, message me privately about it if they're not comfortable, saying their vote in the chat or whatever. Feel free. But okay, well, I guess we can take this one in the chat. But all in favor of Drew as a member, say aye.
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 I know we had one abstain. All right, let me count the votes. Okay. It looks like it is a 4 votes in favor of he's in, 1 vote against, and 2 or 3 abstentions. So 4-1. Or no, how many abstentions? Yeah, 3 abstentions, 4 yeses, and a nay. Rick, I'm not great with parliamentary procedure, so I don't know how we count the abstains in terms of that.
I believe they don't count toward the vote. I'm not absolutely certain, but I think that you go with the majority of the votes that were not abstentions.
Okay, so then
Otherwise,
Drew,
would not be a majority. So I will check that and get back to you by the end of the meeting.
You are correct there in your advice.
Okay. Thank you.
yeah, okay. Well, congrats, Drew, new member of PDHC. Okay, well, next, Nick Smith. Nick Smith, we have, who is not available for any questions, but fellow young person, year or 2 older than me, and he was a charter member originally, and just had not paid his dues quick enough. So I motion that we vote to have Nick be a member. Do I have a second?
I second.
All right.
Yes.
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 Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, all opposed, say nay. Okay, all right. Congrats to Nick Smith. And last but not least, Lizette Rajaratnam. Lizette, I don't know if you want to say anything to the group. I know you might be in the middle of something.
Yeah,
let's
no,
see.
I'm here.
Okay.
No, I just went, what do you want me to say about me? I am Latina. I came from Cuba. I have suffered, but I'm not a victim. That's why I'm fighting for the undocumented people here. Anyone, not only Latinos. I have people in my group that they come from everywhere, not only Latinos. And especially at the school, the public school, I represent the ones that have no voice, the ones that are afraid to go to the school because of ICE or because of police. I hold my meetings in my house because my house is a sanctuary and nobody can come here and ask anyone to get out of the country, separate families. I work a lot in California, in Oklahoma, and here in Maryland. I work a lot with the pro bono resources for undocumented and unaccompanied children. That's heartbreaking. Maybe Drew should try that and help a little bit the families, because what it matters at the end, all of us, we are a race. It's only one human race. And the people who come here to this country, like me, I came here and I chose to live here in Howard County because of a school, because I want to give my 3 daughters a better future. And I'm giving it to them, and I have a better chance for them. And I want not only that for my kids, I want the same thing for all the Latino kids and all the minority kids, but especially for the Latinos, because we don't have the money, we don't have the language, and we don't have the representation. So I am one little voice that have a lot of people and a lot of responsibility on my shoulder. And I am against ICE, to abolish ICE, because that is scum, okay? And for the reform in the police department, yes, totally yes. So yes, I am very progressive. Yes, I am very Democrat. I am registered Democrat. No going around, no wishy-washy, no. I am registered Democrat, and everybody in my household it is. So that's where I stand.
Yes, well, thank you for sharing, Lizette. And before we go ahead and vote on her, is there any comments or questions for? Sounds like not. So, okay, well, I then motion in support that we vote to have Lizette be a member. Do I have a second?
I will second that.
Yes.
Yes,
All in favor, aye?
aye.
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 Yeah, okay, all right. All opposed say nay. Okay. All right. So then, congrats, Lizette. Congrats, everybody. Thank you. Okay. Well, before we go ahead and get moving to our, kind of training on the one-to-one organizing conversations, do want to highlight a couple upcoming events in the community. One is this Saturday. It's an all-day thing. The Indian Cultural Association, which we had their leader, Sanjay Shrivastava, was a panelist at our last meeting. And they have a food and fashion festival at the Howard County Fairgrounds again this Saturday. And the No Developer Donation Campaign Pledge, I believe, does plan to have a table there. We have not paid for it yet. We're working on collecting all the funds between, PDHC, Our Revolution, HOCO, the People's Voice 8, Howard County Citizens Association. So we're all going to kind of share a booth, I think. And if it's still available, I reached out to Sanjay to confirm today. I haven't heard back yet, but once I do, we're going to pay him the fee for the table. So, but even if we don't end up getting the table, it's still, there's going to be probably thousands of people there. I think Deb Young, Councilmember Deb Young, will have a table. I'm sure other, elected officials might have tables. So consider going there this Saturday. Tell Sanjay we said hello. Next Thursday, not this Thursday, but the next Thursday, Columbia Democratic Club has a candidate forum, a Zoom thing. They actually just sent out an email probably within an hour before our meeting starting that has the Zoom information. I wasn't able to get it on the slide in time, but that's just for county council and board of ed races on Thursday, May 5th. And then only 2 days later, Saturday, May 7th, from 8:30 a.m. to 2 p.m. The African American Coalition of Howard County has a candidate forum with governor candidates, comptroller, attorney general, U.S. Senate, and Congress. And that is an in-person event at the St. John Baptist Church in Columbia. A couple of days later, Tuesday, May 10th at 7 p.m., the Columbia Democratic Club has another candidate forum, but this time for General Assembly candidates. That's also virtual. And then a couple of days later, Saturday, May 14th, the African American Coalition of Howard County has another candidate forum that is for state delegate and senator candidates, as well as local county council candidates, and also even apparently they're doing a central committee forum or some opportunity for central committee candidates to, I guess, share why they're running. I don't know if they'll give the slates opportunities to, debate each other on the issues or what, but I know there are quite a few central committee member candidates on the call. So I would encourage people to make it to that. And then last is the very next day and the day before our endorsement meeting on the 16th, Sunday, May 15th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. Indivisible HOCO has their annual meeting with a guest speaker, Representative Jamie Raskin. And I think that's on Zoom. And I see Kat has her hand raised, and that reminds me, I should have probably put our revolution has a gubernatorial forum coming up soon as well, right?
Yeah, April 30th, I put it in the chat, 10 a.m., one little hour to hear from all the governor candidates, except for Westmore, who decided he did not want to answer a questionnaire, therefore he will not be there.
And Peter Francho's.
Oh, and Peter Francho sending his better half, which is Monique, meaning he wasn't brave enough to come either. So there you have it.
You said that's 10 a.m.
Yep, 10 a.m. So very, very, very quick thing. It will be recorded for people who can't come.
So it's a Zoom gubernatorial forum for Our Revolution, Maryland.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, I did not put that on there, but we'll make sure we promote that on the PDHC accounts as well.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So moving on then. Those are the events. Things are heating up with the elections coming up. So in terms of what the club has been up to, aside just from our normal monthly meetings, what we've been doing in between is thank you to Karen and thank you to Nicole. I don't know if Nicole's on the call, but Karen really, took lead on, crafting these events, putting them together. And that is we call them Deciphering Campaign Finance Reports was the event. And it showed people, people know about like open secrets and, the Federal Election Commission for like national elections and how to look up how much money their congressperson is taken from the healthcare industry or whatever. But at the state and local level, it is not so simple. We use our own state database called MD Chris, Maryland Campaign Reporting Information System, I believe. And it's not very intuitive or self-explanatory if you've never used it before. So it can be like very kind of confusing if you're new to it. So we actually put 2 sessions together hosted by former Progressive Democrats of Howard County President Nicole Dvorak, walking people through how to use, the MD Chris campaign finance software and how to look up, how much money has, Courtney Watson taken from the developers or how much money has, whoever taken from whichever industry. So I encourage people to check out both of these videos. I think, Karen, you said there was a slight difference between part 1 and part 2.
Yeah, in part 1, Nicole will walk you through what the website is that the state of Maryland has, where you can look and how to search on that site by candidate, by amounts. You can search on like a particular donor and the time periods. But then in the second session, what she does is she goes into way more detail around how do you look up some of these entities. So for instance, a lot of you'll see names of people or entities in there that it looks like it's different entities, but then they all have the same address. So you try to figure out, so she showed us how to figure out who some of those are by going out to look up who the LLC might be and whether or not it was active. So it was actually it was very fascinating. And she took a lot more questions because we had more time for questions since she was getting into more detail in the second session. So definitely worthwhile.
Yes. Okay, I didn't know if I was muted still. Well, thank you, Karen, for putting those events on. And yeah, Harry.
Yes, I want to go back to the 19th of last week, where the Ellicott City and Western Howard County Democratic Club had their meeting, their endorsement meeting, and they endorsed Liz in the 1st district. They also endorsed the present county executive for re-election. Those and Bolden, Stephen Bolden was endorsed. Now, also Chow Wu was there. He in 9A. He and Steve is in 9A, and so is the lady from Montgomery County. I think she was from Montgomery County, because Montgomery County is a part of 9A. I'm not sure which one has the most voters, whether it's the Montgomery County has more voters than the Howard County section of 9A. I'm not sure that. Does anybody know that, have that answer? I guess not.
I think Harry, I think 9A runs, it's kind of like Katie Fry Hester's district, I believe, unless the map rewrote this, but they run into Carroll County.
Well, right, Carroll County, right.
Right, and I think that 9A, I can't recall, but I thought it's not an even split. I think there's more in Howard County, if I remember correctly, but don't quote me on that.
Well, that's fine.
I know Ken's the map master, and Ken's got his hand up. He can probably give some insight.
I want to make a couple more comments, and then I want to stop.
1 second.
One of the things was, I know we had early on discussions about solely focusing our efforts on the county executive, the county council, and the Democratic Central Committee. We weren't going to try to do anything with the delegates. Now, I'm just stating that so that you are aware of that we are all aware of that, because we've got a decision here. Bolin, who is joined our club, I think at the last meeting or the meeting before last, Steve Bolin, joined our club, yet he's vice president of EC Ellicott City Club, and he sits there at the meeting. I was at the meeting, and allows his club to vote for the corrupt county executive that we have now.
Well, I think
which was shocking to me. Now, the Chow Wu, who made his presentation, and he was talking about equal employment opportunity indirectly, but he was asking for the votes because he thinks that he should be elected to 9A based on affirmative action. Now, I'm talking this language because I spent 33 years in federal service in management and EEO and organization development and all that kind of stuff. So in any event, I think we have some decisions to make, whether or not we're going to go for delegates and senators and all that kind of stuff or not. And if we are, how are we going to deal with Bolin, Steve? I'm really concerned about that. I'm really concerned about if we support him and his club, which he's going to be president of, because the other president is resigning next month, I believe. He's resigning and taking a job in Washington, D.C. So Stephen Bolin is going to be the new president of the Ellicott City Democratic Club. So those are some things that I think that we should be aware of and be prepared to deal with. Thank you.
Hey, since I used to be part of that club, I don't think, I'm not sure how Steve could prevent his club from endorsing Calvin Ball. That's not how that club works. Here in our club, we're saying we are looking to endorse people who align with the values of this club. But we're prepared to endorse Jake and the rest of the executive board, keep me honest, we're prepared to endorse at all levels candidates who share our values.
Yeah, Harry, I know what you're talking about. I think you might be misremembering. What we talked about is we wanted this group to be very local focused and specifically mainly on the zoning and land use and the development, like money issues, as we call it. And so, yeah, naturally, most of our focus is going to be at the county council, at the central committee, and at the executive level. But that being said, you know, state candidates and state delegates do have some say over these zoning and land use issues. And we launched this no developer donation campaign pledge for people of all levels of office to sign on to in Howard County. And both Chow Wu and Steve Bolin have signed the no developer donation campaign pledge. Now, that's not to say that somebody signs our pledge and they're automatically entitled to the endorsement, because that's not how it works. And for some of these races, you know, I think more candidates may have signed than we even can endorse. So it's not an entitlement to our endorsement, but it is to say, you know, despite their endorsement of Ellicott City Dem Club of Calvin, which I disagree with that endorsement. As Karen said, Steve is just one guy and he's not the president. And, you know, Steve not only has taken the no developer donation campaign pledge, but he has it on his lit that he doesn't take any developer donations. And he had that before he signed our pledge. And even after signing the pledge, not only did he sign it, he made a video promoting it. So that, you know, this isn't to say that I defend everything Steve Bolin has ever done or said, but, you know, at least on the zoning and land use stuff is concerned, he seems to, you know, at the very least not take, you know, developer money. So we do have to give him some credit, though. I completely understand if, you know, just any association with that club at all is aligned too far for you. And, you know, I understand, but I want to share my thoughts on that. But yeah, Ken, if you wanted to share some insight on the maps, 9A.
Yeah, with regard to,
It's a small portion of northern Montgomery County, which is really like that part of Damascus. It's not a huge amount of Montgomery County map. So that's all I know about it. It's just that little northern edge. As far as Steve, I mean, who knows what Steve believes regarding Calvin? I don't know. I haven't talked to Steve about it, but he is doing the right thing by signing our pledge and not taking dirty money, basically. And I'm not sure. What really struck me about that meeting was how few people were there and how skewed it was to much older, like, and I'm old, but much older people who live in this area. So that's also interesting to me, that club. But, you know, we know there's only one county executive candidate that we can endorse, and that's Harry, obviously. So that's all I have to say. I'll let Ken go ahead.
yeah, with regard to 9A, all three candidates live in Howard County. Natalie Ziegler and Steve Bolin ran as the two candidates last time, and Ziegler would have won if the Carroll County vote hadn't been counted. She would have won a seat. So she's very strong. Chow Wu initially registered to run in 13, but the new lines put him in 9A. So you get three, at least you get a contest there, three-way contest for 2 seats. That's it.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, like still 80+% of the voters are in Howard County in that district. So yeah. So yeah, it'll be an interesting race, but it's good that 2 of the 3 candidates at least have signed the no developer donation campaign pledge, and maybe Natalie might feel the pressure to follow suit. I hope that she does. But okay, so yes, thank you again to Karen. Thank you again to Nicole for putting these on. They were quite popular, and even, you know, we had journalists on them. We had, you know, people from outside of the county on there. So seemed to, you know, people found it useful. But okay, so some updates. We were just talking about the pledge is, you know, as we talked about last time, Chow, Will, Steve Bolin had signed, Rick as a central committee candidate had signed, and since last meeting, the ball has only continued to roll. Megan's done a very good job of, you know, getting, you know, being responsive when new candidates sign, preparing, you know, her and Lisa Markovitz from the People's Voice, you know, vetting through, making sure all the candidates have actually complied with it. Megan making the graphics, promoting the graphics. But the new candidates who have since signed is the bug seemed to hit the Board of Education candidates. Meg Ricks was the first one to sign. Julie Hotop, Lin Feng Chen signed it, and you know, at least one other Board of Ed candidate has also signed it, but we haven't announced it publicly yet, so I don't want to you know, put that out there in case they fail the check or whatever. But at least one more Board of Ed candidate on the way, and I believe there are only 4 primary winning seats in the Board of Ed race, so potentially we could have 4 pledge signers move on to the general. And as we said earlier, we now have another county council candidate in Joan Pontius, also you know, friend of the group. So thank you, Joan, for signing the pledge. And then there's another one we haven't announced, just because we haven't announced for central committee candidates. You know, if slates decide to sign on, we'll probably do that. But Kathy Howell, central committee, Democratic Central Committee candidate, also signed on. So yeah, let's hope we have even more, you know, candidates. Well, I know for a fact we have at least 2 other candidates in the tank that we, you know, still have to announce. So we will have some good news next month too. The very last thing is the main course of the meeting, and that is these one-to-one organizing trainings, and you know, what is their purpose? Why are they important? Why have I been talking about them for the last couple months to, you know, some of the PDHC members who've been around for a long time? This little graphic is a very good sort of succinct description of why they're important, but I got on the next slides more in depth. But this picture says the one-on-one organizing conversation is the heart of grassroots organizing. These are talks used to build a relationship of trust, identify common grievances and interests, and move people from inaction to action. And, you know, I agree with everything that's on this slide. And, you know, just some background, like one-to-ones, they're probably mostly used by unions, is probably, you know, the entity that uses them the most, but they are used just general organizing even outside of unions. But you know, as this picture says, identifying common grievances is very essential to the one-to-one. So, you know, when you're trying to build a union, getting fellow workers to recognize those common grievances, even if they have other things that they disagree on, is very essential to getting these workers who, for all we know, like might literally like harbor racist resentments against each other or something. But, you know, it's the job of the union organizer using one-to-ones to make these workers recognize their common grievances and interests and work together. So that is that. So I've got a couple explanatory slides here. So some more background. This is my own words now here. One-to-ones are natural yet intentional and also uncommon conversations. And I put it in conversations. You'll see why, because it's, again, uncommon conversation. But one-to-ones are natural, intentional, yet uncommon conversations with someone you want to be in a public organizing relationship with. I want to touch on that last part, being in a public organizing relationship. That means doing what we are all doing together here as members of a club, of a like-minded club, sort of based on ideology to a degree. And if we want to be effective, we need to organize together and not organize independently. So that's an example of somebody you would maybe want to do a one-to-one with, is somebody that you're in a political organization with, and kind of want to build a deeper relationship with them. Also, candidates use them on their races to, establish deeper relationships with the volunteers on their campaigns and to bring in new volunteers to the campaign. And you do a one-to-one with someone you want to be in a public organizing relationship with. So that's to say, you wouldn't do a one-to-one with your friend who's your best buddy, your best friend, but there's not necessarily a purpose for you to do a one-to-one with them because you're not organizing and power building with them. So there's no purpose for it. So, more about the one-to-ones is, you're a one-to-one. I call it, I put it in quotations, conversation, because it's almost kind of like an interview. And you'll see in further slides, when you ask somebody to do a one-to-one and then you do the one-to-one with them, they should be talking about 70 to 80% of the time. And then your 20 to 30% of the time is mostly you just asking questions, or maybe, empathizing with something that they say. But, through these questions and through listening, active and engaged listening, you can find out more about the person's life, their values, their vision, their motivations, which are all essential to discovering their self-interest and why they organize, and what they organize towards. The conversation should be about 45 minutes to an hour. It can be like on the shorter side, like 30 minutes, maybe even. But, I think it's a good sign if it's going longer, but you want to be respectful to people's time. So you don't want to go, for too long, which is why they tend to cap it at about an hour. So definitely it's better to have these in person, because, you're trying to build a deep relationship, a personal relationship with somebody. And it's just much easier to do that in person than over Zoom, and definitely over a phone call. So admittedly, I've gotten out of the habit of doing one-to-ones religiously like I did when I was organizing in college on the Eastern Shore. And that's when I became a true believer in one-to-ones. Is I had already been organizing without doing one-to-ones, and I had kind of stagnated. And then I got trained how to do one-to-ones, and I started doing them. And then I just saw my organizing efforts growing exponentially, because as we'll get in on further slides, even asking somebody to come to a meeting is making an ask of them. Hold on, I'm busy right now. Sorry. Sorry about that. Yeah, but making an ask of somebody, even asking somebody to come to a meeting is making an ask of them. And if you're asking somebody who's essentially a stranger to come to a meeting that, they're not of a group that they're not that familiar with, they're probably not going to do it. But if you take the time to build a relationship with them and then ask them to join your group, well, then it's like, well, yeah, I know Jake, sure, I'll come do it. And so once I started doing that in college when I was organizing, we saw our college Democrats chapter grow, basically triple in size in just a year or two. So these are very effective. I did them all the time in college, but admittedly, COVID hit. I came back to Howard County, and I kind of got out of the habit of doing them, especially in person. Been doing them on phone calls somewhat, but I wanted to, finally get back into it, get my organizing like it used to be. So, it is a shame that the example one-to-one that Eduardo and I are about to do, it is going to be over Zoom and not in person. These trainings usually do try to do them in person. And, it might also be on the shorter end because we only have so much time. So Eduardo and I might only talk for 30 minutes or so. Moving on. So there's a couple, like, they put out just generally that one-to-ones can or should accomplish for purposes. So I'm going to kind of just go down each one. So purpose number one of the one-to-one is to, as I've said over and over again already, build a relationship, build a deep relationship, I should say, and a professional or public or organizing relationship. That's not to say that you still can't be friends with the people that you organize with. I consider most of the people I organize with to be friends as well. But again, it is not exactly the same as a non-political sort of or organizing relationship. But the reason why we need to build the relationships, whether you are running on a slate with candidates or whether you're just in a group organizing towards common goals, is organizing effectively together requires trust, communication, cooperation, and sometimes even intimacy. And I mean intimacy just in the sense of like having a close bond with somebody. I don't mean like physical intimacy, but things, if you don't know somebody well, if you've never actually sat down and had a conversation with somebody, it's very easy to sort of make assumptions about where somebody's coming from or about how somebody feels, or guess what this person feels on certain issues, or even more importantly, why that person feels that way on those issues. It is hard to gain that understanding, gain that clarity, have an understanding of where somebody's coming from, what their background, what their experiences that led them to become the person that they are today. It's hard to have that understanding without doing a one-to-one. And if you don't have that understanding, it's going to be harder to empathize with that person. They talk about in organizing, this isn't as much with one-to-ones, but in organizing, they talk about if you want to be effective, you have to have what they call a power organization. And that's just another way to say the lone wolf approach will only get somebody so far. You can only do so much as a one-man army, and you're going to burn out inevitably. So if you want to have long-term sustainable organizing, you need an organization of other people, organized people, and organized money is the other half of building power, they say. But if you're going to have a power organization work with people, you need to work effectively. You need to communicate effectively. And a lot of things can get lost in translation if the people organizing together have never even had a conversation together, don't even know, the first thing about each other. So that's even outside of organizing, and then again, on a more practical organizing level, like just even something as simple as like recruiting somebody to come to a PDHC meeting will be much easier if you've done a one-to-one and built a relationship with them, because then it's not just some weird person. Or even when we get people who aren't already in our like personal network, but they submit, hey, I want to become a PDHC member. And then we just email them and say, hey, pay the dues. And then a lot of times they don't pay the dues. We shouldn't be surprised that they didn't pay the dues, because we haven't taken the time to build a relationship with this person to then make what they call a proposition to actually, as the previous pictures say, move them from inaction to action. So once you have these conversations, once you've built that relationship, it feels way more personal. You're not going to feel as guilty asking this person to do something, because it's not a stranger that you're asking. So as simple and as corny as it sounds, one-to-ones, you will notice the impact almost immediately, just in terms of when you ask your fellow organizers to do things. It's very hard. You can build relationships besides just from a one-to-one, but it's very difficult to build a deep relationship without doing a one-to-one with somebody, in my opinion, anyways, or at least I'm not very good at it. Okay, so purpose number 2 is to uncover somebody's self-interest. Self-interest, as the top line says, to boil it down, your self-interest is explaining why we do what we do. why does somebody, maybe organize around healthcare? Because they don't have healthcare. So it's in their self-interest to get Medicare for all. And so it is in their self-interest to find other people who might have a completely different stances on different issues, or different religion from them, or harbor some different thoughts. But when it comes to their immediate self-interest, which is, if I do not get healthcare, I am going to die, or I am going to go bankrupt, and I need to do something about this. I can't do it on my own. I need to find other people in the same situation so we can work together. And that's what self-interest is, essentially, is not what somebody does, but why they do what they do. And identifying overlapping self-interests is the foundation to successful organizing, because the way that I was taught this is, you're taught at a very, you're taught just from the foundation of being in this country, that you should be a selfless person. You should do things for others. You should, don't donate all your money to charity or whatever. Do all this, do all that. And the truth is, as nice as that sounds, if you're being selfless and you're not doing anything to help yourself, you're going to get stepped on. You're going to get stomped on. And the truth is, the powerful in our society, the rich, the wealthy, they do what's in their self-interest all the time. They do it every single day, and it screws us over every single day. But the truth is, their self-interest is shared by very few people, because they're in a very unique situation in terms of being so powerful and wealthy. But we, as regular people, even if you are fairly well off, I don't think anybody here is, Bernie Sanders top 1%. A lot of people still have a shared self-interest in overturning this corrupt system that is, in all reality, working for very few people. Again, even the more well-off people, it's still not really working well for them. So, that's why unions, again, do self-interest or use one-to-ones, because they need to get workers who might absolutely hate each other, or have, some really deep personal disagreements, get them to recognize their shared self-interest and put those other differences aside, because we need to keep our eyes on the ball here. And and when you identify the overlapping self-interest, it's almost not even asking somebody to do a favor for you, because you've already established what's good for them is good for you. So if you ask them to do something, you're really asking them to do themselves a favor. But it's, if you haven't, displayed that our self-interests are the same, it's harder to get people to sort of see that. And again, without a one-to-one, without doing these deep conversations, without building these relationships, it's going to be very hard to uncover what somebody's self-interest is, and then to therefore determine if there's any overlap. And also, last point, you do a one-to-one with somebody who you want to enter an organizing relationship with, but every once in a while you'll have that conversation, you'll do the one-to-one, and you'll come out of it and think, wow, sounds like their self-interest really doesn't overlap with my self-interest at all. And that just means that, okay, then don't organize with that person. You gave it a shot. The self-interest don't overlap, so let's do our own things. And again, that does happen from time to time. Purpose number 3 of a one-to-one conversation is to develop clarity, which I know sounds very broad, and it is broad because it can mean a lot of different things. But to relate it back to the self-interest aspect, for example, like sometimes people aren't even consciously aware of what their self-interest in organizing or why they do the things that they do are, because it's not every day that you get asked about it. It's not every day that you have to think about it. So maybe they've never thought about it before. So that's why that's where developing clarity comes in. That's why asking questions, asking what they call probing or risky or deep questions is very important, because you are trying to, ask them things that, the most important question is why, as they say. And, you're not just asking about what they care about, but you're asking why they care about it. And if you ask somebody that for the first time and then they haven't really thought about it, they start to kind of figure it out as they explain it, and maybe have some revelations. Helps you understand them better, helps them to understand themselves better and their self-interest better. So that is purpose number 3. Purpose number 4, which is the least important one, I guess. Sometimes I actually forget about this one, but that is gathering information, whether that be, hey, are there any other people that you think I should be connected to, or that would want to be involved with what we're working on? Find out, hey, are you involved with any other organizations, networks, that sort of thing. Is there anybody that you think I should be connected to? That sort of thing. Think of it as developing leads for future one-to-ones and a future base. That is, those are the 4 kind of main purposes of the one-to-ones: is building a relationship, uncovering somebody's self-interest, developing clarity, and gathering information. And, some last tips that I've kind of already touched on a little bit is you want to ask deep or quote unquote risky questions, as in, and that's what they mean by it's a natural but intentional and uncommon conversation. Is that I should have put this on, but something that they tell you to look for in one-to-ones is you look for stories. You look for story, as in somebody might tell a story of something that happened to them in their childhood or in their adult life that really illustrates why they feel a certain way or why something's important to them. And yeah, you can illustrate clarity through these stories. And so, you might be asking about things that you might be a little bit nervous to ask somebody about in a regular comment. It's oh, do I really want to ask about, their parents' divorce or whatever, whatever it may be that has come up in the conversation. But in a one-to-one, the idea is, if you think that it might be important, to why they feel the way that they feel, you should ask. And it's all about respect. The idea is you ask not in an aggressive way, and you give the person the option to say no, of course. And if they don't feel comfortable sharing, then you respect that and you move on and you go to the next thing. But that's part of how you build those deep relationships, is by asking quote unquote risky or deep questions. And then the last thing that was maybe kind of hard for me at first, because if people haven't noticed, I talk all the time and I talk about myself a lot of the time. But in a one-to-one, it is supposed to be the other person talking 70 to 80% of the time, while you mostly ask questions and listen. And so that's why I like one-to-ones. It's an excuse for me to, shut the F up and listen to people for once. So typically at trainings, people do a one-to, after, given the breakdown that I just gave, they then do a one-to-one live, in front of the audience, so people can kind of get an idea and then go try to do it, with somebody that they want to do a one-to-one with. So I'm going to call up my assistant, Eduardo Ribeiro, who has so graciously agreed to be the person that I do an example one-to-one with in front of everybody. So Eduardo, you are here, correct?
Yes, I am. I'm glad to be your guinea pig.
Yes, thank you, Eduardo. I'll make sure it goes well. But this is actually a good opportunity. I think my battery for my laptop is at 7%, so I'm gonna take this upstairs, plug it in the charger before we talk, so that it doesn't die in the middle of our tutorial here. And then I am going to just run to the bathroom real quick. So would people be okay if we take a little pause, a little intermission until 8:22 p.m.? I'm sorry to do that. But
Yeah, that's fine, Jake.
Yes, thank you. All right, we'll be back in a second.
Okay, guys, we'll come back in like 5 minutes. Run and get drinks or whatever else you need.
I'm using whenever Ken Stevens gets back as my time measurement here. All right, well, I don't want to wait for too much longer here. Take my sweatshirt off real quick, and then I guess we can go ahead and get started, and maybe people come back midway through. But all right, you ready, Eduardo? Yes. Okay. So, Eduardo, I know you know, it's a little bit different from a traditional one-to-one. We do know each other a little bit already, but you know, obviously, I know you are, you know, a Brazilian immigrant, but you know, where, or could you speak more specifically on like kind of what your specific circumstances were like growing up in whatever part of Brazil, you know, you sort of, because I know it's a very unequal country like the US.
I was born in central Brazil, born and raised, a state called Goiás. I was born in a big city called Goiânia, but my family was already living in a small town. And I was born in the big city because we had public hospitals there, but not in the little town. So we went there for that specific purpose to be born. And then we went back to our hometown, a small town in Goiás. So it's in the middle of the Brazilian savanna. It's not like your typical Amazonian setting that most people are used to. Even though the rivers there, they run towards the Amazon River. They are, you know, tributaries of the Amazon. From, as most Brazilians, as you probably know, from a very mixed racial background, the whole Latin American combo of Portuguese or Iberian in general, right? Indigenous and Black. Very blue collar family. Do you guys hear music?
I hear something.
Yeah, me too.
It's good though.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I'm glad it's not in my head. I thought it could be for a second. So yeah, so I was born and raised in Brazil. When I was born, Brazil was, you know, entering the military dictatorship. So I grew up under the military dictatorship, which started. I was born in the early 70s, and the dictatorship started in 1964. So it's a, you know, it's a very interesting, to say the least, environment to grow up. And of course, always went to public school. In Brazil, if you're poor, you cannot afford. I mean, here too, right? You cannot afford private school. So I went to public school my entire life. And in high school, that's when I started, you know, get interested in activism, student activism. I created a little newspaper in my school. We were able to publish only one issue because it was confiscated by the principal, and they threatened to get my parents arrested because they couldn't arrest me because I was a minor. And I thought, no, they don't deserve that kind of trouble, and they already went through too much.
So did your parents have some sort of a, like, political or journalistic or activism background, or what made you like think to do that?
Well, my parents didn't have much of.
They have candidate for lieutenant governor on.
Cat, mute. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
They were from very poor backgrounds. They didn't have a chance to go to school. My father was pulled out of school when he was 8 years old to work in a brick factory, for instance. My mom, coincidentally, also to work in a brick factory. And then, domestic work and, basically factory work and everything that helped pay the bills. So they weren't very educated, but they always placed a lot of value in education, and they made sure I had the minimum to at least attend that public school. But one thing that always was very important for me to wake me up in terms of political activism was, even though I was growing up under a dictatorship, my father always told me stories of how things were before the dictatorship started, and that's still a time when you had to speak about those things kind of quietly, especially if you're poor and you don't have many resources to defend yourself. But he always told me about that. So that's how I started getting interested in first resisting the narrative that was very strong in my hometown, that the opposition was always wrong and the military were correct in whatever they were doing. So I'm glad that my father, even though he didn't have a chance to go to school, he was extremely smart, very aware of history, and he got me interested in that. So there was no, I wouldn't say political activism by itself. I think survival was the greatest, the greatest gesture of rebellion, and just letting us hear that there was another alternative to the official narrative. I think that was extremely important. So I was always already from an early age trying to talk to my classmates about a different look into the official history books and all that. And I think that I owe that completely to my parents, and the same thing. I am, as I said before, a Brazilian mulatto because, some of my ancestors were enslaved Africans, and in Brazil, that wasn't a long time ago. It was Brazil was the last country to abolish slavery. As you probably know, 1888 was the official date. So, my grandparents, parents were still born when slavery was still the law of the land. So, racism is all over the place, even though Brazil doesn't, people don't think of Brazil as being, a very racist country because we are mixed, and you would wonder why a country that it's mostly of African descent would still have racism. But, there was, and it was uncheckered and it was rampant. And more recently, of course, laws were created to combat that and to affirmative action measures to also allow people like me to finally get to places like the university and public service and all that kind of stuff. I was like I said, a public school student. So for us, poor kids growing up in a small town and attending public school, the dream of going to the university was almost laughable. Well, not almost, because people laughed at my face when I said I wanted to go to college. So a true story there. But I managed to get into Federal University in the capital of my home state, where we had already moved when I was a teenager. And I majored in journalism. And one thing that always shocked me when I got to that university is that we are in the middle of Brazil, in the heart of the country, a mestizo country. And I had never seen so many white people in my life in the university. In my entire classroom of maybe 40 students, there were just another mulatto like me. you know. I said, where have these people been hiding this whole time? You know? But it's because it was such an elitist thing. It was such hard to get for people who came from, you know, a poor background in public universities and all that. And, you know, fortunately, there were governments in Brazil that finally changed that. Now, if you go to a Brazilian university, people will look more like me and more indigenous and more African, you know. You literally see indigenous people walking, you know, in the hallways of the universities, attending the university, writing dissertations and theses about their culture. And that is a conquer of, you know, the past couple of decades we had of democracy in the country. So that's why I value those conquers of the Brazilian democracy very much. And I am very disgusted by any attempt at sabotaging that from either the local elites or from abroad. You know?
Yeah. So you say, you know, you're Afro-Latina and you know, descendant of enslaved Africans, and do you also have like indigenous in you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Most certainly. But in Brazil, we are not very good at keeping genealogies. And of course, you know, even if we tried, we'll get to a point in which people just didn't have documentation. The Portuguese weren't as good as keeping paperwork as, you know, the Germanic tribes of Northern Europe. You know? But still, you know, I know because I met the people in some of my ancestors who told me stories of their ancestors, and I know what the situation was, you know, the kind of pain and suffering and discrimination they went through, you know. And because of that, slavery it's just too recent in Brazil, you know. So when I was growing up, I could still hear, you know, from people whose parents were slaves, you know.
Yeah. So you know, I'm curious. I know it's a very broad question, but you know, what was it like living under a dictatorship? You know, how old were you when that ended? And you know, what was it like scary, I guess, being kind of an outspoken person as you are?
There were moments. I think, you know, the thing is, it's not only it's just how unexpected it is. People don't expect someone, you know, of a poor background to be outspoken. We are expected to be quiet and shut up and do our job, right? And I wasn't that kind of person. Maybe my life would have been easier if I was, you know, but I wasn't, you know. So, you know, because we only had in a small town, we didn't have private schools in the small town. So even the rich people would send their kids to the public school. And of course, they would pour some of their own money into the public school to make it a little better for their kids. So I would have this, you know, arguments with doctor kids, you know, kids of doctors and lawyers, and they would look at me, what does this little mulatto kid is thinking? You know, where does he get all these ideas from? But I was already the dictatorship had started thawing when I was like 10 or 11. And that's when my activism already was, because I was, you know, old enough to start reading more. You know, I didn't have a library. You know, our town didn't have a library, for instance. So the few things I read, you know, I would read them over and over and over and over again, like the history books that the government would distribute in the beginning of the year. I would memorize them by week 2, you know, which would be great because I would get, you know, straight A's because I was just memorizing, you know, because there was nothing to read. There was no public library. There was nothing like that. And then I was elected in 1986. We were getting ready to write a new constitution. And there were these activists, like union leaders, you know, teacher union leaders that started organizing students to represent the student body in national and state level conferences to provide the Congress, the National Congress, the Constituent Congress, they called it that specific year, with ideas, you know, grassroots ideas for the Constitution. And I was elected by my school, so I was sent for the first time in a bus to 2 states away, a big city, and I was representing my group. And that's when I realized that there were so many people who thought like me, you know, and so I came back to the small town with lots of ideas. And that's when I started that little newspaper that didn't go far.
Hey, I didn't know that story. So that's an interesting one to hear. But so to go back a little bit to something you mentioned earlier of like when you first got to university, it sounds like was that a bit of a culture shock to you? And it sound it is interesting for me to learn as an American. I feel like Americans probably a lot of times just lump all like South Americans or all Brazilians or all people from one country. We kind of just look at them all the same. It sounds like there's sort of a racial hierarchy and caste system even in Brazil a little bit.
There is. It's more like I would say more superficial type of racism, in the sense that people won't look too deep into your ethnic origins. It's the way you look, and the way you look has a lot to do with also your social class. There's the official beauty standards of the day, and then there's the other one that tends to be the more indigenous looking, the more African looking people. So it's the same thing, I think, all over Latin America. If you watch a soap opera from any Latin American country, the browner people are always the servants, and it's actually kind of accurate in that sense, because that's how it is in real life. Again, it takes political will. It takes democratic stability to change those things, and I think that's when you started seeing more diversity in places like the university and other places.
Yeah, well, so you mentioned something new to me in this conversation, and that I didn't realize that you were a journalism major. I knew you had done the newspaper thing when you were younger, but I know you as Eduardo, the linguist with a PhD in linguistics. So I'm curious, when did you kind of start to make that step into that world, and what got you interested in that in the first place?
In journalism?
Or no, in the linguistics.
Oh yes, well, that's a very good question, because I was already working at the newspaper. In my second year of journalism, I had already been hired by a newspaper, a daily newspaper in my hometown, called Diário da Manhã, Morning Daily, and I was enjoying it quite a lot. I like writing. I like the reporting. Going to places, interviewing people, and coming back. And it was. I tell my kids that it's not that I'm super old. I tell them that, right? It's just that things weren't that technologically developed, so everything was typewriters, and even at the university, even people here already had computers. I'm sure people my age, but you're still using old typewriters from the 1950s, 1960s, and the same thing in the newspaper. And it was like the stereotypical newspaper newsroom. It's the smoke in the air and people yelling and people drinking coffee, and it was fascinating. I love journalism. But then there was a talk on the situation of the indigenous languages in Brazil, and I watched that and I thought, wow, there are way too many journalists and not enough linguists to document all this linguistic diversity. And one of the professors at that department offered me a grant, and that allowed me to I think it's a fellowship, you would call it, right? That allowed me to leave my job at the newspaper and be an undergrad researcher, and the rest is personal history. Because then from there I got my master's in Brazil, researching indigenous language from the southern Amazon, and that's how I ended up in the US. I came to get a PhD and still here.
Yeah. So when you came here for your PhD, that was your first time coming to America?
I had come once in 1995. Again, another grant for a summer school in linguistics. And then I had a boss in Brazil who happened to be American. And he said, you know what? I think you would enjoy, considering the way your mind works and all that, you would enjoy going to the University of Chicago. I had never heard of it. I had no idea what the hierarchies of what is considered a good university in the US. I just didn't know, and I still don't care much about that. But it turned out to be a good match. I really enjoyed going there and doing my research. I worked on an indigenous language for my dissertation from Brazil called Carajá, which is now spoken by maybe 3,000 to 4,000 people. So it's not like a huge, but for Brazilian standards, it's still a lot, because there are languages that are down to 10 speakers, 5 speakers. I study another language that when I started studying the language, it had 12 speakers, and now it's down to maybe 2 or 3. Because of all the massacres and genocide and ethnocide they went through. So we have more than 100 indigenous people, depending on the way you count, 200 different ethnicities, but very little in the Brazilian population, the amount of indigenous people in comparison to places like Bolivia and Mexico, Guatemala, and so forth, Peru. In Brazil, the extermination went way beyond that.
So did you have like, preconceived notions about like what the US was gonna be like, or what you had heard it was, whether that be positive or negative?
Mostly, that's the thing. Brazil, and I think most Latin America, is very US friendly. We watch more American movies on TV than Brazilian movies. Oh yeah, there's no comparison. We listen to American songs on the radio all the time. I realized after moving here that there were songs that I had no idea. I heard them my entire life. I had no idea what they meant, and then it's like listening to them for the first time. Because Brazil, the exposure to American history and culture, it's huge, and I think that's in most of the developing world. Because of the power of Hollywood.
Was that dictatorship? Was that propped up by the U.S.?
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah, it was a very U.S. friendly dictatorship. The government that was before democratically elected started to, try to, as it's the same history you hear over and over again all over the world, right? To show some independence, to try to develop the country for its own people. And that didn't go well with either the local elite and of course some multinational corporation interests and all. And of course the whole strategic interests also during the Cold War and all. So that's how we started that dictatorship. And that's how other coups happened after I was already a grown up, right? The one against Dilma and against mostly against Dilma, and the lawfare against Lula. That all was propped up by strong international interests, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So I think I cut you off earlier though. So were you saying that you actually had a positive perception of America, kind of based off the media and everything you'd grown up?
Yes, I knew, because of course I watched the movies and everything, but I also read a lot about it. I knew that there was, the racial discrimination and everything else. So I had a tempered kind of approach to it. I was never too shocked, honestly. That first cultural shock in Brazil, going to the university and not seeing people who looked like me very much, that's still my major cultural shock in my own country. Coming to the US, because of all the exposure we have to American culture and history, it wasn't such a big one. Of course, linguistically, yes, I thought I knew some English when I came to the US, but then when I realized that I could not even order a sandwich without onions, I said, I have a lot to do. Like one thing is to take your test, in writing and like standardized tests. And then when you throw in Chicago, in 1 month, you learn so much, and I think I learned quickly because I did quite well, academically speaking, I think.
Yeah, that's what my older sister says too. She was like a Spanish minor in college, did it probably for like, over 6 years. And then she went to Spain and, Mexico and Colombia and Peru. And that's when she really learned how to speak Spanish, because just being there, you kind of have to learn almost. But okay. So you came to the US, you got your PhD in linguistics, and then you made your way over to Maryland at some point?
Yeah, no, between coming to, starting my course, my education in Chicago and getting my PhD, there was a whole interval, a whole, how to say, hiatus. Yeah, in the sense that I met someone and, we fell in love, got married. Then we moved to Maryland because she was from this area. And then that's how, everything was put in the back burner because, the kids, that. And then I finally went back there and defended my dissertation. I never lost contact with my research. I always liked linguistics more than academia. So I was still doing research, publishing papers, I created a website for the field of linguistics in South America that it's like a digital library. So we keep on scanning books. And it's very useful, especially for people from small towns in Latin America that don't have access to decent libraries. And now what makes me even more satisfied with that is that indigenous intellectuals are going to the website and downloading stuff about their own cultures, things that were documented hundreds of years ago or, a few decades ago. So it's serving the community. And I like that, even though my current job has nothing to do with academic interests. I still do whatever I can in that little volunteer website.
Yeah. Okay. So you took the hiatus. I assume probably had maybe some kids that were listening to the music earlier. Yeah, two kids. Yeah, and so I know just from prior conversations. So you were working at like a sewage plant, right?
Yes, it's a very convoluted professional history because after I defended my dissertation, I got my PhD. I was already working as a freelance interpreter for both Spanish and Portuguese in Baltimore, DC, and this greater Baltimore, DC area. And after I became a PhD holder, I got a postdoctoral fellowship at the Smithsonian. So that lasted 2 years. That's what those fellowships tend to last. And afterwards, it was like, whoa, there are no academic jobs in my field, so I need to pay the bills and raise these kids. And I found a job here in Howard County in the, I think it's a Little Patuxent Water Reclamation Plant or something like that. I worked there for about a year as a inspector of, sinks in restaurants, of sewage samples that were dropped at the treatment plant. So it was a public employment, not, I'll just say it was what they call a contingent job. So it wasn't full time. It wasn't. It was 32 hours. So it didn't have all the benefits of being a public employee, including the stability of the job. It was interesting, because I've always, like I said, coming from the background I come from, any sort of job is okay with me. My first job was construction work when I was about 13 or something. So, I don't mind. Actually, I like physical work or any work that is necessary to be done in order to sustain, support your family. But it was interesting also in terms of the cultural environment that it was new for me. Usually, if you just you tend to circulate around more academic environments, you have a more filtered idea of what people think. And there I got to see that there are some people still harbor very, very ignorant, ill-informed feelings towards people of other races and countries and everything else. So it was interesting to see that. And afterwards I finally got a job now full-time as a medical interpreter, and that's what I've been doing for the past 4 years at the same institution, a hospital in Baltimore that caters to a very large Latino population. And coincidentally, many of the members of those communities are indigenous people from Latin America. So I think I came full circle in terms of my work with indigenous populations, in Brazil, working directly in their villages in the Amazon and also in central Brazil in the more savanna type of area. And here, every day I'm working with people whose native languages are not is not Spanish. People who are survivors of 500 years of colonization and massacres and discrimination. So really like working with that population.
Yeah. And so I can't help but notice, through your social media and just through, talking to you and knowing you, sort of, international affairs is something that, you're very passionate about, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious why that is, and has that always been the case?
It has always been the case, because the first time I started looking at historical atlases and all that, I started noticing the effects of both colonization and then later, imperialism in maps and in people's in population movements and in people's well-being and all. When I was a teenager in Brazil, when I started being an activist, and because I started finally traveling and getting more literature, I was very much into the liberation movements in Africa, for instance. Of course, they happened mostly in the 70s when I was still a child, but there were still struggles going on. Apartheid, for instance, was extremely strong in those days. I read, for instance, there was a nice little old journal called Cadernos do Terceiro Mundo. It's like, how do you say? It's basically a third world journal or something like that, written from a very African / Latin American / Asian perspective, the global South, they call it nowadays, right? And that's when I learned about, what was going on, let's say, in Angola and Mozambique and all the former Portuguese colonies, and of course in South Africa and East Timor. East Timor, it's a tiny country that was never much on the radar of most of the world. But because of this connection with East Timor used to be a Portuguese colony too, that now is, it's in the Indonesian archipelago. Indonesia invaded it and massacred hundreds of thousands of people with US support. And they struggled a lot to gain their independence. Finally, they did, and because of all of that, because I knew that Angola still was being threatened, for instance, by South Africa, because South Africa feared, the inspiration that the socialist government in Angola would have towards its own population. That's when I started getting interested in all that kind of stuff. And the interest only grew. And the more information I got, the more things I could put together, and the more people I met. When I went to college in Brazil, there was one good thing, even though the locals, the local people who looked like me weren't very numerous. There was a mutual agreement with some countries in Africa and Latin America that allowed students to come study at that university for free. So that's when I met, people from Bolivia and Chile and Angola, and Mozambique, and we started learning about their own experiences too. So all that was fascinating. So I always had this eagerness to learn more about other cultures and other countries.
Yeah. Do you ever have any interest in trying to hop back on the journalism?
Sometimes I feel tempted to, I feel tempted to write on that. I think now I would probably write, of course. Maybe I don't have that naivete. Is that how you pronounce that word? That
You got it.
that innocence. Because when I decided to do journalism, I thought, my God, these people can really change the world. Well, but still, I still think that the free flow of information is very important, and that's something that I think helped a lot towards the end of the dictatorship in Brazil, is when people were finally able to read more and get more in touch with people from other places. They started being able to compare and to question more,
Yeah.
And nowadays, with all this flow of information out there, the power of the mainstream narrative is just so strong. It makes you question that innocence I had when I thought, my God, when these computers become connected and people have all this information, it's going to be like explosion of knowledge and understanding and all that. Well, for a kid, I grew up without a library in my hometown. I loved reading, and I didn't have the money to buy books or a public library. So I thought, I put a lot of value in information and reading and journalism and all that kind of stuff. I know that things are not that simple, but hey, that's one of the benefits of growing up.
Yeah, and yeah, it's not that simple, but good journalism every once in a while can have an impact. Whether it was Glenn Greenwald's thing, and
exactly
about, or even with our local bloggers and here in Howard County, dropping the occasional.
That's the thing.
Group.
That's the thing. You're completely right. There things could be much worse, and that's what scares me now. That you see so many people being censored on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all this. Well, that's concerning, because even growing up under dictatorship in Brazil, I could get this little journal. I would read it quietly in a little corner, so I wouldn't get too much attention, and that created an effect. Not only me, but like I'll give you an example. I think why that is important. East Timor, Noam Chomsky was one of the few international voices that kept that alive in the international press. And towards the end of the Indonesian colonial rule over them, that played a major role. It wasn't just people being massacred quietly in the jungle. No, people were learning about it. You know what I mean? And even after they finally obtained independence, they were still attacked by Indonesia. So I remember, even though I'm a linguist, first and only time I met Noam Chomsky, I'm not dropping names, it's just to say that my linguistic interest for Noam Chomsky wasn't that big. First thing I asked him, do you know what you did there? Do you consider yourself responsible for the fact that, partially responsible at least for the fact that the country finally now is independent? Two of the freedom fighters for Indonesian for East Timorese independence, they got Nobel prizes for that. And I asked Chomsky if he considered himself at least partially responsible for that. And he said, no, I was just trying to amplify voices, of the people who were really doing the hard work there in East Timor. And it was my first opportunity of meeting an icon of linguistics, and I didn't care at all about asking him anything about linguistics. For me, that was because linguistics is beautiful and all that, but I think the kind of work he does by exposing dictatorships like that saves lives. It changes people's lives, and I think that's more important than any academic degree or his gigantic intellectual reputation as a linguist. Compared to that other work, I don't think it's that big. With all due respect, who am I? But still,
Yes, no, he's that's probably one of his lesser historical contributions. Ironically, is the linguistic stuff. He's certainly, holding the U.S. accountable. That's for sure. Well, Eduardo, normally I probably would, continue to talk to you a little bit longer, ask you some more questions. For example, I know, you work, with CASA and some local communities. So maybe if we have more time, I'd ask a little bit about that, and, try to quote unquote gather information. But if everybody wants to give Eduardo a round of applause, thank you, Eduardo, for, sharing openly in front of everybody.
Thank you.
That was great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, yes, thank you. And a lot of times at these things, or after these trainings, it's pretty standard for really like there's there are kind of a structure to one-to-ones, but there is quote unquote no right way or wrong way to do it. Sometimes even if a one-to-one wasn't perfect, really the great thing is doing them at all is going to build at least some sort of relationship. You will have some sort of better of an idea of their self-interest and, a little bit more clarity. And again, just having a relationship at all is better than not having a relationship. But after these sorts of trainings, it's pretty common for the trainer to ask the people in the audience both to say something, positive about the way that, I conducted the one-to-one, but also give, say one point of feedback or critique of something that I could, improve better, whether that's, I wasn't asking enough risky questions, or I missed an opportunity to go deep on something that would have, helped me pick up his self-interest. But I want to give people an opportunity to, sort of give that feedback or say some comments about what they thought about, a one-to-one conversation if you had never, seen that before. If no one has any comments, that's okay.
No, I think it's great that knowing where people are coming from, not only which country or geographic coordinates they were born and raised. No, I mean, how did they get to the point where we have met? That fosters a lot of understanding that sometimes is lacking. That we may have the same set of knowledge and intentions and all that, but we came from different angles, and we may have something to share and contribute even when we do not agree. And I think it's just a good way of showing that is doing these things that you just show us how to do. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Eduardo. And a pitch that I want to make to everybody on this call, whether you are a candidate or just an activist or somebody who, whether you're a candidate or an activist, I want everybody to commit to me and to commit to themselves that they're going to try to do, that they're going to reach out to 3 people over the next 2 weeks, 3 people over the next 2 weeks, and reach out to them and ask them, say, hey, I want to do a one-to-one with you. I want to, I'm involved with, if they don't know what a one-to-one is, it can be a little bit awkward to invite somebody to a one-to-one because they're not going to know what that means. But you can just say, hey, I'm involved with the organizing. We both like the same things. I'd like to, talk to you and find out about, what you're interested in, what, make the pitch like that. I want everybody to invite at least 3 people that they want to enter into, again, an intentional public organizing relationship with. Ask them to do a one-to-one. 90% of the time, somebody's going to say yes. And I remember my first time being on the receiving end of a one-to-one in college. It really did change my life in a lot of ways. It made me feel empowered. It made me feel special. It made me feel important. It made me feel like, wow, so there's somebody who finds what I have to say interesting and wants to hear me out, wants to work with me. And, that was a very powerful feeling for me for the first time. So it's important both to do it with people you already know, but also people who, again, moving people from inaction to action. This is how you get people involved with organizing. I'm sure all of you have progressive friends that agree with you on the issues, but aren't involved with organizing. This is how we get them involved with organizing: is you do a one-to-one, you make them realize the shared self-interest. And then once you do the one-to-one, once you've built that relationship, then you make the ask. I want you to come to this meeting. I want you to do this. I want you to do, but it's a lot harder to get them to do anything if you haven't invested the time, done a one-to-one with them, built a relationship. So that is, I see Ruth has her hand up.
Right, but what if they don't know much about the organizations that the organization that you're involved in that you think they could be interested in? When you have to spend some time telling them a little bit about that? Yeah, definitely. And there's a couple ways to go about it. Is one, you could, when you reach out to them initially, to ask them to have the meeting, say hey, I'm a member of this organization, so that they have kind of a little bit of an idea. But another thing that people say, and I really don't know how I feel about this, because again, there is no objectively right or wrong way to do it. But some people say, you shouldn't even make a pitch or an ask to them
in that moment. Like, you know, you've done the one-to-one, you're at a coffee shop or whatever, you do a one-to-one with them. The one-to-one's over, but you're still at the coffee shop with them. Some people say, don't make the ask right then. Don't ask them right then after the one-to-one, hey, I want you to come to my environmental meeting. They say, like, you know, go home. A lot of times you're supposed to write down the results of the one-to-ones that you remember, but you go home, you wait a day or two, and then you reach out to them. And then you say, hey, I've been thinking on our conversation. Basically, this is its whole own training that I'm not going to do, but, you know, the steps of organizing it is you do a one-to-one, you discover their self-interest, and then you make what's called a proposition to them, which is a fancy way of saying you make an ask of, I want you to do something. And it can be as simple as just coming to a meeting, but you're supposed to be intentional about the proposition. You're supposed to like kind of plan for it ahead of time. You think like, okay, and you do the proposition based off what you learned from their one-to-one. You say, what is their self-interest based off what I learned from the one-to-one? How do I, when I make the proposition, I relate it to their self-interest so that it's kind of harder for them to say no because they think it's in their self-interest. You're also supposed to think, you're supposed to kind of pre-plan of like, what might this person's possible objections be? And then think of the rebuttal to that ahead of time. So you might think like, oh, this person doesn't have a car and I'm asking them to go to a place. Okay, well, in my ask, I'm going to craft that I have a ride for you, you know? Yeah, you're right about that, Ruth, that there would have to probably be a little bit of time and preparation before just immediately making the ask after the one-to-one. But
Hey, Jake.
yeah.
So for people who want to know more, you had sent me a link to a website that talks about these. I think does it tell more and more stuff about not just the conversation you had with Eduardo, which, by the way, Eduardo, fascinating history.
Yeah.
Can we share that link with people?
Yeah, I'll try to pull that up. That was, just on, it was actually a blog. It was a blog.
Yeah.
I'm not even familiar with the blog, but I'll share it. But they phrased it very well of like, you know, the person literally says, and I actually truthfully do kind of agree with this statement, even if it's a little, he goes as far to say, if you're organizing without doing one-to-ones, you're not really organizing is how this guy says. Because, you know, if we're not constantly bringing new people into the club, raising more money so that we can actually get the things that we want to get done implemented, then we're really just a group of people putting on webinars and putting on conversations, which is helpful. It's public education, but it's not really organizing. So I will and this is why I want to get back on my grind, because I want to be, you know, more effective at this too. Bringing in new paid members. Oh God, my dog's about to throw up. Right on my carpet. Yeah. Okay. I just put the link. I just put the link in the chat. In the thing, they do talk about like, oh, here's the 9-step formula of how one-to-ones are done. I want to say I was not taught that 9-step model. So like that is a little bit over my head, but the general stuff at the very beginning of like why they're important, why they're super, you know, necessary, all that stuff is very good. So check this out. I'm sorry this was a longer meeting tonight. We do have the recording. We are gonna, if Eduardo's comfortable with it, you know, post it publicly, because sometimes I need to refresh myself of, you know, it's been a while since I've done the one-to-ones. I'm a little rusty. So especially that PowerPoint might be helpful. So we will distribute all of that. Thank you everybody for coming tonight. Thank you again, Eduardo, for, you know, being so open and honest and willing to share.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Eduardo.
Thank you,
guys.
Eduardo.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Take care, y'all.